If you're putting somebody else first at the cost of your health and your well-being, then you're not going to be in a good place to be able to help them regardless. And that's what I was doing, right? I was putting everybody else first, but in the meantime, I'm depleting all of my energy and making myself literally sick. And so how well am I then able to help everybody else around me?
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode 194. Today we're talking about how to recover from mom burnout with Nicole Lovald. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting membership, and I'm the author of the upcoming new book, Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Welcome back, dear listener. Oh my gosh, I feel like I have been talking to so many people lately, and I'm so happy to be connecting with you, the Mindful Mama podcast listener, because you are my peeps. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming back, for listening, for all your kind words. They're amazing. They fill me up. And if you're new, a special welcome to you. I am so glad you're here, and this is going to be such an amazing episode. In just a moment, I'm going to be talking to Nicole Lovald. She was a former corporate busyness addict, and she turned into a yoga teacher and a life coach, and she advocates for self-care. And we're going to be talking about how to recover from mom burnout. And Nicole was a military spouse, and she was juggling a full-time job, a 2-year-old, and this constant stress of dreading the word that her husband might be killed or injured. When things got even worse, she started to, the stress of her life started have her hair falling out in clumps. And she turned this all around. And I know this story is going to be so inspiring for you. If you are feeling busy, if you are feeling overwhelmed, this is the episode for you. So I can't wait for you to hear. I want you to listen for about how our bodies really start to shut down if we live in constant stress, and how losing patience is a sign that you need to take care of yourself, and that it's, noble to be of service to others, but sacrificing yourself, what you're giving won't be as meaningful. And this is really, really true. So before we dive in, I just want to give a shout out to my 200th episode is coming up really soon. Oh my gosh, 200 episodes. And I want you for this episode. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your story of maybe how the podcast sparked something in you, a thought or week, something simple or something more profound. I really would love to have your voice. I'm hoping to get some, I would really need some more voicemails. So will you please tell me the story of an episode that you liked, a takeaway, something about the message that we're giving here that maybe sparked something in your life. So please, if you're listening before the 200th episode, if you're listening in the future, please disregard. Go to mindfulmamapodcast.com, or I'm going to put a link in the show notes. So if you're listening on your phone, you can kind of click and look at the notes. You'll see a little link, and you can leave a message right there and just tell me what takeaways have you had from the Mindful Mama podcast. That would be so amazing. And one more quick message is that Raising Good Humans is available for pre-sale now. Yay! Woo! Confetti. You can go to raisinggoodhumansbook.com, and you can order the book there and get it on pre-sale. And then when you do, go back into raisinggoodhumansbook.com, and you can get all these awesome good book bonuses. So right now I'm reading chapter 1, so you're going to get the audio access to the first chapter. You're going to get this amazing masterclass that I have put together of experts that has been incredibly popular. You're going to get access to that. And if you buy 3 or more copies, you're going to get a shout out right here on the Mindful Mama podcast. So cool. So I want to be able to shout you out and say thank you. So go buy some copies for, new parents, for yourself, for anyone who wants to raise good humans. That's at raisinggoodhumansbook.com. And now on to this episode. Nicole, thanks so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Thanks for having me, Hunter. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you too. And you're a yoga teacher and you coach people and all of these things, but I'm really curious about turning the timeline back and looking back. And you told me that you were a military spouse and you were kind of like, you call yourself like corporate junkie. So tell me about that life. I'm a little curious about the military spouse life, because that's, an experience a lot of listeners have, right? And a lot of people in the audience have, and also that corporate junkie life for sure. So take us back a little to there.
Okay, absolutely. My husband served in the military for 25 years. So he was in the military for a really long time. I didn't know much about the military going into it because I live in Minnesota and we don't have a lot of military bases or installations here. So it was kind of an unknown. I got married pretty young. I was only 21 years old. I think that's, in my mind, that's pretty darn young.
Yeah, and these days, very young.
Exactly. And so we got married and started traveling with the military. So I was kind of thrown into this brand new environment that I didn't know anything about, didn't have any, friends or family members. And it's an interesting and very different lifestyle than what I was accustomed to. He had training missions that he would go on for 2 weeks at a time, sometimes a month at a time, where we'd have absolutely no connection to one another. So this was before, a lot of that Instagram and Facebook and things like that. And so we didn't have a way to connect via social media. He didn't have a phone, so we weren't able to talk at all. So it was hard because he would literally take off, for 2 weeks or a month at a time. And I'd be left alone in a brand new place, brand new location where I didn't know very many people. So that's the challenge or the hard part about the military lifestyle.
No, when you were there in these different places, bases and things like that, and it's funny because I can relate to sort of, I have a good friend who her husband is a pilot, so he goes off and does but just commercial and jets and things like that. But that must have been incredibly lonely. Or were there other people there? Were there other spouses there to connect with and talk with? I mean, was it kind of like you're the kid who's moved to a new town and you have to make friends at school, or was it just very, was there a lot of solitude?
It was really lonely at first. I'll never forget, and my husband will never forget this because I won't let him. On the 4th of July, this was many years ago, but on the 4th of July, we had only been in New York. We were living in upstate New York at the time, and we had only been there for a couple weeks. And he was sent off on a mission or sent off on some kind of training. And I sat in our new home by myself, watching all of our friends and neighbors, have their festivities. And so it was incredibly lonely. But then once you were able to kind of sink into the lifestyle and get to know other military families, then the community support was amazing. But there was always this transition time. There was always this period where it would take, a few weeks, if not a few months, to start to get to know one another or to get to know the other military families. And so there was a lot of solitude and a lot of loneliness as a part of it. But then there also was this great camaraderie once you really kind of sunk in and got to meet people.
How did you handle the solitude at the time? What did you do with that? Because I imagine, you're like this 20-something-year-old woman. You're just
It was hard at the time. I didn't have a yoga practice. I didn't meditate like I do now and have some of the self-care practices that I think in retrospect would have helped me a lot. But I would go on, I remember going on long walks, and I started taking classes. I took a baking class for fun and a jewelry making class for fun, just different things to try to get myself out into the community. Because I knew that if I forced myself out of my solitude, if I forced myself to, put myself in social situations, that I would meet people, and that there were probably a lot of other people like me who were looking for that, who were yearning for it. So it was just a matter of kind of making myself, just get outside, go meet people, and it'll get better. It'll get easier. But it was hard. It was hard when we'd move to new locations. There's always that transitional period.
Yeah, I guess you can't really work. I mean, in that situation, like, how are you going to work for somewhere, if you're there for 6 months or something like that? I mean, that's got to be incredibly hard for all military spouses. Like, you're going somewhere and you're just going.
It is, and I had a lot of really random jobs, and I tried to look at it like it was a fun opportunity for me to try different and new things and just kind of explore. So I worked in coffee shops, I worked in malls. My most interesting job, I think, at the time was I led whitewater rafting tours for a short period of time.
That sounds fun.
So I tried to look at it like this is an opportunity, even though I had a college degree and I really wanted to work in more professional positions and work on my career. If I knew we were only going to be in a location for 6 months or less, I would just try to find a fun job, something that, helped me get out in the community and meet people, and something just to experience. But then sometimes in the military, you will be stationed in locations for a longer period of time. So we ended up traveling quite a bit, and only lived in one location for 3 years. That was our longest term. Mm-hmm. But for some families, they might be somewhere for 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years. So some military spouses are able to, and I was able to do this when we were in Texas for a longer period of time. You can start to work in positions that are more aligned with what you might be wanting to do professionally.
Yeah, I guess so. Huh. So this must be Q in corporate junkie. How did you go? How did you go from wandering military wife doing fun jobs and exploring and taking baking classes to corporate junkie?
Yeah, it's interesting. If if anybody would have asked me when I was 20, 21 years old, what are you going to do with your life? I never would have anticipated that I would have the positions and the jobs and the career that I have had over the years. But I just kind of let my circumstance help to guide me. And so what happened is when we were working or living in upstate New York, we were only there for a year, and I knew we were only going to be there for a year, but I really wanted to find a job in my profession. And at the time, that was working in nonprofits, working with at-risk kids. My degree was in sociology, and I was working on a master's in counseling. And so I started applying for jobs, but everybody knew, all the businesses around, all the corporations and companies around us knew by looking at my resume that I was a military spouse. Because they could see that the jobs I'd had were in military locations and were for only 3 months, 6 months, things like that. And so I couldn't find a job. And so one day I walked into the education center on base. And in that education center, I just said, I'm looking for a job. I'm working on my degree. Here's what I'm doing. And they said, we'll hire you. And so I started working in military education. I was helping. It was when online colleges were just kind of becoming popular. And so I was helping soldiers enter into their degree programs while they were deployed. So that was kind of my beginning of working in military education. And then when I moved back home to Minnesota, there's an online for-profit college called Capella University. And so it was a natural transition for me to work for them in their advising department. And so it might not sound that corporate necessarily because it's higher education, but it was working in a high-rise downtown Minneapolis with all the cubicles and the marketing department and the business department, and so that was my avenue into learning about the corporate lifestyle and what it's like to be around another 300 to 500. I think when I left, there were about 500 other employees working towards one mission. And so that was, it was a kind of a roundabout way, but that's how I started working in the corporate world.
I had a taste of corporate life when I was in college. I went to University of Delaware, and I was paying for college. Actually, I'm just finishing off paying for college, but and so I wanted to get Delaware residency. So I stayed in Delaware and worked for a year.
Okay.
And I ended up working in this like corporate environment. I was a temp, but I was like in this cube farm, and they kind of realized that, I wasn't incredibly, they gave me some jobs that were somewhat interesting, but I remember it was sort of this 6 months or less than that, where I was in this cube farm. And it was, for me personally, it felt like the most like horrible kind of work. I mean, I'm a self-employed person for a reason, because I just killed my soul to like sort of be without the fresh air and to have to, just do this work that felt sort of mindless all the time. For me, interesting, I have a feeling sort of the yoga is coming into it soon, but like the one sort of saving grace for me at that time was I would go for a run with like these old guys at the office. Yeah. So it was like me, like, I don't know, it was like 18 or 19-year-old, temp going for a run with all these like year-old guys.
Get outside and get away.
I had to. It was like the only thing that helped me handle it. Did you feel at home? Did you like the work? Did you like I don't want you to feel bad if you liked the environment that I've told you.
No. I actually loved the work because after I was there for a while, they realized that they needed some support around building a military office. They really didn't have any support for their service members who were taking classes. And they had a lot of soldiers over in Afghanistan and Iraq who were taking classes, and they just didn't know what to do or how to help them. So I was able to kind of create my own job, which was really cool. So I built a military office from scratch or from the beginning, and was able to help people, which is one of the themes kind of throughout my life and my career. And that's what motivates me. So I loved the work, but the environment was absolutely, I can put myself back in that space when you're talking and feel it like viscerally in my body, what it felt like when I first started. I actually shared a table with another person. I didn't even have a full cubicle to my own. Like I was elbow to elbow with somebody else in their computer. And I remember feeling guilty if I got up to take a lunch break, or guilty if I had to go up and use the bathroom again. And just the heavy, I tend to feel a lot of energy around me and feel other people's energy. And so feeling just that heavy weight of the people that were coming into work all day, it just was too much for me. Even though I really did truly love the work, it was the environment that was just so stifling.
That's funny.
So no, I'm with you.
Yeah, you'd think they could you'd think like there could be just more attention to environment and making that an enjoyable experience. Like I really remember feeling like I don't want to understand Dilbert, the like cartoon. I was like, yes. I had never understood Dilbert, and I was like, no, I don't want to understand Dilbert.
Yes. I don't blame you. I remember walking in at first too. Everything was gray. There were no colors. There were no, it's just all gray. A sea of gray cubicles in front of you. Very depressing. Yeah.
So how does the yoga come in, Nicole?
Yeah. So the yoga actually came in when I was working in that cube farm. My husband deployed to Iraq. He deployed twice while we were married, once to Kosovo, and then the second time he deployed to Iraq, and that was the scary one. The first one was a peacekeeping mission. He was still gone for a year, which is really hard. But the second one was frightening, right? I was scared that something was going to happen to him. He wasn't going to come home the same person, all those things that you can imagine a person thinks about and goes through. And yet I was in Minnesota in this environment where we didn't have a big community, the community or military community support that I was used to on these other installations. So I was really stressed. but I wasn't talking to anybody about it. I really wasn't letting anybody see it. I was trying to be, and I kind of had to be. I had our son at the time was 2 years old. And so I had to be strong
Wow.
for him. I had to be strong for my husband's family, or I felt like I had to be strong for them, right? And
Mm.
so the yoga comes in because I started going to the gym. That was my self care at the time. And so I started taking my lunch breaks and going. There was a gym downstairs. And on just a Friday afternoon one day, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this yoga thing that everybody's talking about. And so I got into this yoga class. I'd done maybe some classes online or, some videos, things like that, but I'd never been physically in a yoga class before.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget and I talk about this in my book a little bit, when I enrolled my yoga mat, I was a little bit nervous and looking around and everybody's talking about work stuff. But at the end of the class, when we got into Shavasana, I felt like for the first time, I wasn't worrying. My mind just kind of shut off and I wasn't, thinking about my son and how all the things we had to do at night when I got home. I wasn't thinking about my husband in Iraq. And I just had that moment of bliss, that moment that, most of the people listening are probably yogis, so they know what we're talking about. But it's that, okay, everything's all right. That moment of peace where I didn't have to think, I didn't have to worry. And it was beautiful. So that was my first experience.
This episode is sponsored by Candlewick Press, publisher of You Are Light, the latest title from children's book author and illustrator Aaron Becker. You open this book to find a graphic yellow sun surrounded by a halo of bright die-cut transparent circles. And then you hold the pages up to the light and enjoy the transformation as the colors in those circles glow. Aaron Becker follows as light reflects off the earth to warm our faces, draws up the sea to make rain, feeds all things that grow, and helps to create all the brilliant wonders of the world, including ourselves. You Are Light is about finding the light within each and every one of us. For kids, it gently introduces the concepts of colors, mindfulness, the environment, ecology, and the interconnectedness of our own lives with nature. For adults, You Are Light makes a perfect holiday gift that serves as a luminous remedy for any seasonal winter blues. You Are Light by Aaron Becker, available everywhere books are sold, and I highly, highly recommend it. It is a gorgeous book that I cannot wait to put in little hands this season. That's an incredible amount to be holding. To have a 2-year-old in general, all parents of 2-year-olds, it's just crazy making in general to just have a 2-year-old. Forget having single parenting with the fear that your partner could be blown up in any moment. And then your whole job as well. That's an enormous amount to be holding. I can't imagine. Your body must have had such a sense of relief to kind of move through those things that your body was holding, right? Your body's holding all of this, and to move all of that through your body, I can imagine that was an incredible bliss to just release for a moment.
Yeah. And, our bodies give us messages, right? And my body was telling me that I was under too much stress and that I was holding too much in by my hair falling out. Wow. So I didn't mention that, but I was losing weight, as we do when we're under an immense amount of stress. And I can't lose weight when I'm trying ever, right? So for me to be losing weight like that, my hair started falling out in clumps. So my body was telling me, you're definitely holding too much. And I like to tell people that, I had the terrible twos all to myself. And then on top of it, I'm trying to send care packages to my husband, and he was a leader in the military. So I'm sending care packages to, all the people that work for him and to his unit, because that's what we do when we care. And so, it was taking so much on and feeling like I needed to, save the world and then save my family and save myself all at the same time. And so my body's,
That's classic mommy martyr. You're like
Yes.
everything and everyone, and I can do, all the things. I can do all the things. And your
All the
body's
things.
saying, no, no, you can't, Nicole, do all the things.
Yep.
Look, your hair is falling out now.
Yep. Yep. Let's take a break, Nicole. You can't do that. So then I started doing yoga weekly and got to the point where my friends would notice if I hadn't got my yoga class in because they could tell I was so much more irritable. And so yoga started to, have those effects on me, the calming effects that we know about. And so I just fell in love with it and started to feel better after going through the classes. I started to take better care of myself. I started to not be so much of a martyr. And then I dove right into when he came home a couple years later. It was a few years later. I dove into a teacher training program. And it wasn't because I wanted to become a yoga teacher. And the irony there is now I own a yoga studio. But I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher, but I wanted just to learn more about why does this make me feel so good? Why does this make me feel so much better? I wanted to dive into the philosophy and learn more about the background of yoga. So I just fell in love with the practice.
I want to hear a little more about the effects. So you went from, you were losing weight, your hair was falling out in clumps,
Yeah.
and you're doing, for everyone to having some calming effects. But describe that a little bit more. Describe the change a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So when my hair was falling out and, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have that wisdom. I didn't have the education yet to know why that was happening. So I immediately went to, WebMD and Mayo Clinic and all the online resources I could to find out if I was dying. Which I realized I wasn't. But, immediately my brain went to, do I have cancer? What's wrong with me? Something is really wrong. So I scheduled doctor's appointments and I had to include my family. And of course, I'm still just taking this weight and this pressure all on myself. But I started going to clinics and doctor's appointments and asking them what's wrong with me. We did all these blood tests and all these different things, and everything kept coming back like, no, you're fine. Everything's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. And so after doing a lot more of my own research and starting to read about the nervous system and read about the impacts of stress, I started to connect the dots and figure out that really what was happening is my body was in fight, flight, or freeze all the time. And that's that state where our bodies are in the sympathetic nervous system, right? Where our bodies are constantly fighting and thinking that we're needing to protect ourselves from injury. But for me, it was protecting myself from the worry that something bad was always going to happen. I mean, I was literally waiting for the men in uniform to show up knocking on my front door.
Oh.
If the phone rang, I immediately was worried that it was going to be someone saying my husband had died. And I think that's the stress that military spouses don't talk about. It's that constantly you're just waiting for that phone call, waiting for that doorbell. And that puts so much pressure on you. So I just learned more about, what stress does to our bodies. And so then I started to realize that the reason yoga is helping me is because it's getting me into my parasympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. It's because it's getting me back to my natural state where I should be all the time, but obviously I'm not.
That's the place where our body's immune system can function, right? Like, because the sympathetic nervous system literally shuts down all immune system function because there's an immediate threat that your body has to take care of, right? This is what the nervous system is responding to. And our systems are designed so that, so then our muscles tighten, our heartbeat raises. We don't give energy in the system to the immune system, to long-term health and things like that. It goes to immediate muscle tensing so you can react to whatever threat is there. So if you're constantly in that, your immune system is really getting no energy, anything. And so, to put yourself back into parasympathetic nervous system is to then to put your body back, to give, energy back to your immune system, to, lower the blood pressure, loosen all the, a little of the tension and all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would crash every day at the end of the day and not, I wouldn't understand, why am I so tired all the time? Well, it's because my body's been working so darn hard all day long. And so I had to kind of relearn. I had to relearn how to bring my body back into that natural state. And it didn't happen overnight. I mean, this was years, certainly, of work that it took to be able to, now I can understand, or I can feel the stress symptoms as they're coming on. And I know when mama needs to go take a little break and meditate for a few minutes so that she doesn't explode on her kids or whatever it might be. Right. But now I can recognize those signs in myself, but it did take a long time to really figure that out and to retrain my body to get back to that natural state.
Yeah, because your body was just reacting, never taking this step back to see, to even be aware of what you're feeling or thinking or sensing, all of that stuff like that. That's just not there. It's just, constant, react.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I think when we see people stressed out like that, or we know people are under an immense amount of pressure, I would have people say, hey, I'll take your son for a day. Why don't you go get yourself a massage? Or why don't you go do this or that? And that's helpful, right? Like it's nice to have that time. And it helped me feel like I had network of, or people that want to support me. But it really, that's not the cure all. Just one day of, or a couple hours of getting a massage or doing this or that is not going to, and it wasn't for me, just bringing you back into that place where you can heal your body and build your immune system. It really was a longer process of learning how to do those, learning more about my body, learning more about the symptoms, and then just really, I keep saying retraining it, but it was this, coming back over and over and over again until I finally felt like my body was more in that state of balance, where now when I have stress and I have things going on, challenges going on in my life, whether it's little things like the kids freaking out at Target because they want another Beanie Boo or whatever it may be, or major, health scares or life, crises, I feel like I can handle it so much better because now I'm not just reactive like I was when I was constantly in that sympathetic nervous system place.
Yeah, I think there's so much here to learn from, and really that you keep saying, Nicole, it wasn't a short process. It took time. It wasn't just a one-off thing that helped. It was something that was systemic. It was something that I had to incorporate into my life. It was something that I had to practice. I had to, because those old habits that you had of just simply reacting and going and, pushing through and ignoring all your body and the wisdom it has for you. Mm-hmm. Those are really strong habits. Is that curious about like your upbringing and your family? Were they of a similar, like, just push on through kind of attitude?
Of course. Yes. Yes. And the martyr, my mom was definitely a martyr, taking everything on and trying to fix everything and take on other people's stress and worry and things like that. Absolutely. And I think, when you're a military spouse, it's something I learned too at a very young age is I didn't want to worry my husband's family. So I wouldn't say a whole lot, right? So I would just hold that in. I didn't want my family to worry about me. So I wouldn't say a whole lot. So it's taken a lot of time for me to realize that if they take that stress and pressure and whatever worry on themselves, they're making a choice, and that's, them choosing to, but it's okay for me to share. It's therapeutic, and it's healthy for me to share when I'm going through challenging things. And, vice versa. If somebody's sharing with me, I get to choose whether or not I fully take that on as my own, or if I'm just there being supportive and being helpful.
So now I'm just kind of to play devil's advocate for the listener who's saying, but it's good to be self-sacrificing. Like it's noble. It's to be putting others first is sort of a noble act to do. What would you say to the person who's maybe having that kind of objection as they're listening?
Sure. If you're putting somebody else first at the cost of your health and your well-being, then you're not going to be in a good place to be able to help them regardless.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing, right? I was putting everybody else first, but in the meantime, I'm depleting all of my energy and making myself literally sick. And so how well am I then able to help everybody else around me? So saying, you have to take the oxygen first before you give it to somebody else, that we hear on the airplane every time we travel, every time we fly. But that's really true. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be in a place where we can have the energy to play with our kids, where we're going to be mentally in a good place to be able to handle their tantrums and their bedtime needs and, all those things. And so I do think that it is noble and it is wonderful to be in a place of service to others. And I've built my career around doing that because it's so meaningful to me. But I've learned that when I sacrifice myself, whether it's in my work, counseling and coaching and doing things like that, or yoga teaching too, or my family life, or with my relationships with my friends, no matter what, if I am depleting all of my energy and I'm not taking that time to take care of myself, I can try to be helpful and I can try to give, but it's not going to be as meaningful to either parties if I'm not coming from a healthy, well-balanced place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Do you see a difference in the way you were as a parent to your son and then later your daughter, sort of in the before and after picture?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I have so much more patience with them. And that doesn't mean, I certainly have the days and the moments where I lose my patience. But to me, that's always a trigger. That's a sign, or that's a symptom. That's a sign that, hey, you're not necessarily in a good place. What can you do to help to get back to that place so that you do have patience and you do have energy? But I found that I wasn't, yelling at my kids as much, or hardly at all. Um, as they're having tantrums and their meltdowns and things like that kids do, I can almost separate myself from the situation now and just see it for what it is without having all of that emotional attachment. And so it's such a beautiful place to be able to be in, to kind of just witness the experience and not be so emotionally drawn in that you get reactive to the situation. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm a completely different mom after finding these practices. I'm definitely a better wife after finding these practices, and probably a better friend and neighbor and everything else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we experience every relationship, everything we do in our life through our minds, through our bodies. If we are not taking care of our body mind, then when our body and mind is healthy then and peaceful, then it needs less attention, right? Ironically, right? It's like as you give it more attention, like you need then you don't have all these crises happening.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So what do you recommend for the people for the listener who's maybe, wants to bring yoga more into their life and wants to have a regular practice, but is having trouble because, you might have small children, you might have a full job, things like that. How did you make that, happen for you?
Yeah, the best thing for me was when I went through my teacher training program. It was called Living Your Yoga. And so the premise, or the kind of the mission of our teachers, was to help us to understand that yoga is a living, breathing thing. It's not just an hour class that you go to where you maybe flow through vinyasas and things. It's really a practice that you can use throughout your life. And so it's not just the physical aspect. And so for me, understanding that it's not just the physicality of the practice. It's really, where can you be more mindful? Where can you use your breath throughout your day when you recognize that you're getting kind of worked up? For me, sometimes my practice was literally coming home and just getting down on my mat in a child's pose while my kids climbed and played on me. But that was my practice. I was, being playful with them, but I was also taking some time just to tune into my body. And still to this day, sometimes I get on my mat and I might have an idea that I'm going to do a half an hour physical practice, and my kids come and they want to play, and I realize it might serve me to just be playful and be with them and have some fun versus, having this set practice. And so I think the best thing for me was really understanding that yoga is so fluid and you can use it throughout your days in whatever way makes the most sense. A yoga practice can be getting up away from your desk and, going outside and walking for 10 minutes. That could be your meditation or your yoga practice. And so that's how I try to look at it. And that's when I'm working with busy moms, parents, people we have so many things going on, so many pressures these days. Just setting your phone off in a different room for an hour could be your yoga practice. But I just went on a tangent. So what I was trying to say is that, really any way that you can find ways to nurture your mind, body, and spirit is yoga.
Yeah.
And so it's just figuring out what works for you. So like Hunter, what does your yoga practice look for you on a daily basis?
Well, I get up and I put my feet on the ground and I say thank you in my mind to the universe. And then my yoga practice is very simple these days. I mean, I do go to a class once in a while and I do a bigger practice once in a while, but on a daily basis, it's very simple. I do child's pose on the ground. I don't pull out a mat for this. I just do child's pose on the ground, and I do cat and cow to wake up my spine. I do a twist. Mm-hmm. I do, kind of like sometimes what I like to refer to as rolling around on the ground yoga, which is like, can be really great. You're on your back and pulling your knees in and just doing those twists and a little bridge maybe, but just basically bringing, waking up the body in the different ranges of motion. And it may take 5 or 10 minutes, very short. And I do that before I do my sitting meditation. But that's what my consistent daily practice really looks like right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And my practice is similar to that, where I get on my, I actually do roll out a mat, but I get on my mat every day and do the physical practice. But I think the part that, I like to talk about, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of it, is that we can bring the yoga practice into, almost each and every moment of our day. And it doesn't have to look like that physical practice. So if you don't get on your mat, on a daily basis, don't beat yourself up. Instead, figure out, okay, what is it that I need today? Maybe today you do need that physical practice, but maybe you just need to breathe more deeply.
How can you stop the doing and just be for a moment? Like whatever that being is, right? And sometimes I think of like the physical asanas as a way of like us doers to kind of move into being, because it's this mindful movement, right? So it's just a way of really being present with movement in some ways. And then as we become more comfortable with that, then we can be in some ways more present with, for me anyway, that was the path it took, is that it went from movement, from running into yoga, and then into just sitting still.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take that pathway, whatever your body is needing right now, if it's needing more movement, if it's needing walking, if it's needing running or a physical practice. But the idea is to just really practice to stop, to bring the mind into presence with the body, to be attentive to what is the body feeling, to notice what the sensations feel like, to be able to sit with the discomfort, to be able to sit with the beautiful things. And what allows us to really feel that bliss at the shavasana that you described really beautifully is that you are, the present with all the rest, all the way through up until that point, right? And so your mind had been practicing being present. So then when you were there in the Shavasana and it felt so good, you weren't just thinking about what to, what to make for dinner later. You were actually noticing how the intensity of good sensation and what that felt like.
Exactly. And I do have some resources and some guided meditations and practices in my book, Om Sweet Om, A Corporate Junkie's Search for Enlightenment. So if anyone's listening and they're looking for some ideas on, okay, how do I breathe? I don't know how to breathe in the right way or in the way that's going to calm my body. I don't know how to move my body in a way that might feel good. So certainly I want to mention that to your listeners so that they know that that's a resource as well.
Absolutely. It's been beautiful to talk to you, Nicole. Where can people find out more about you and your book?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find out about me and the courses that I offer in my book on my website. It's Nicole, Nicole, Lovald, Lov as in Victor, ALD as in dog, NicoleLovald.com. And then my book is available as well on Amazon and also on BarnesandNoble.com.
That's cool. And we will, of course, put a link up at the Mindful Mama podcast page for this episode. Nicole, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I know that so many will relate to this. This is the story of our lives, right? That there's so much doing and so much giving in so many ways. And then to realize that you really had to give to yourself, and then you're able to give in such a bigger way. It's really beautiful. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it.
Thank you, Hunter. And it's been so much fun getting to know you a little bit better and getting to know your audience too. So I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Isn't Nicole's story so inspiring? Yes. This is a message we need sometimes again and again, and that's okay. We just take those small steps forward. Absolutely. So listen, before you go, if this episode inspired you, please go to mindfulmamapodcast.com. There's a link right where you listen to the podcast on your phone, and leave me a voicemail about what you're taking away. And in general, if the podcast has inspired you, it would be so great. I want your feedback for the 200th episode. Please, please, please. It would do me a solid, please. And of course, remember that Raising Good Humans is available for pre-sale. So go to raisinggoodhumansbook.com. You can order it there from IndieBound or Barnes & Noble or Amazon. And then you can get these awesome book bonuses. Including, if you buy 3 or more copies, a shout out here on the podcast. So I would love to give you a shout out. Please do that. So 2 big asks today. Give me your feedback. 200th episode is coming up right at mindfulmamapodcast.com. And then go ahead over to the raisinggoodhumansbook.com and get the book. Yes. If this podcast has offered you value at all over the last number of listens, I know this book is going to offer you more, and it's also a great way to support the podcast. So pre-order the book now. I'm wishing you a beautiful week. I wish you peace and joy and all of those wonderful things. And I will see you next week right here. Namaste.